Hi folks, welcome to Crisco's Corner. Are you tired of the same old blah, 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 blah from the media? Do you like unfiltered commentary? Would you like to go back to the days when our rights meant something? Well, you've come to the right place, Crisco's Corner. The fight to get back the ideals of our founders will be long and hard. Please support the channel by subscribing. And as always, thank you for your support. Hi folks, welcome back to Crisco's Corner. It's kind of a follow-up video that I had on the previous video concerning how conservatives, moderates, and Republicans should just take a breath. It's a tough year, especially with the rioting at the Capitol. It's a tough hit. Trump lost. They still the Dems have control of the House, barely, and have control of the Senate even less than barely. And have patience, have patience. I believe it was Napoleon that said, never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. And this is a really good article, and I'm going to go through it here. It's from the Federalist. Why Democrats are going to blow a big Biden presidency big time. Democrats live in the Washington bubble. They don't know how to get out. In the 2020 election, it cost them politically. This is by Kyle Simon, looks like. And he knows it's dated November 13th. He doesn't know that Trump lost, but he probably assumed when he wrote this article. But they knew about the congressional and the Senate races. This was long before, though, the two House races in Georgia. But I think the article still is extremely timely. Democrats in 2020 focused their electoral efforts on a single point. They were against Donald Trump. That's true. They used up all their ammo. I said once it was like a farmer using up all his seed, all his crop seed, his seed corn. Disaster. They used everything they had, every bullet, every rock, every twig, every trick, we'll say, well, we can't say too much here at YouTube. They used every irregularity and oddity, / you can fill in the blank with what I mean when it comes to voting. They did it all. And in the swing states, they still barely beat them. It was less than 12,000, I believe, in Georgia. Less than 13,000 in Pennsylvania. And in the Midwest swing states, it was pretty similar. So without the putting their thumb on the scale, so to speak, because you can't be careful what words you say, the algorithm will pick them up. They still barely won. That might work in the presidential race, and it did, because he didn't know, but he had a pretty good idea. Depending how the final vote comes out, but in the Senate and House races across the country, voters aren't buying it. Now, he didn't know about what happened in Georgia. Activists, insiders, and social media might be anti-Trump all day, every day, but ordinary voters wanted leadership and moderation. By helping the Republicans keep the Senate and expand their minority in the House, they might get it. Well, we know that they lost the Senate, so it's even worse. Several factors caused the Democrats' delusion, and they are delusion, because they think they won. Honestly, they do. And that could be used if the Republicans are smart, especially in the Senate. Have a meeting with, one thing I'll give the Democrats, they stick together. There's strength in numbers. They vote in a block. Now, that might not be great governance, but it's good politics. That will lead to good governance. Republicans need to stick together. Right now, the Democrats are splintered, and they know it. Democrats' delusion, but all relate to the same basic thing, living in a bubble. For party leaders has always been a concern. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senator Chuck Schumer, like all members of Congress, live their daily lives surrounded by people who are obsessed with politics as they are. And not just politics, but insider politics and give and take of Washington power structures. That makes sense for a member of Congress, but it does not match how the rest of us spend our time. True. When they're not talking to fellow politicos, they're talking to rich donors and industry lobbyists. Your view of the world is similarly unrepresentative. To the extent they step outside those circles, it often into the social media websites that also feature the loudest and most extreme opinions. We have seen several viral videos for 4 years of young women screaming in rage at something Trump had done. How often do you encounter such a sight in real life? Well, not normally, no. That vision of unreality is hard for anyone to overcome. The truly talented politicians manage it, though, and that's true. Having a feel for the average Joe is not something that can be learned from a spreadsheet. It is innate. Bill Clinton is the last Democratic leader who could really be said to have that gift, and that's true. It let him push a progressive agenda just far enough, knowing when to stop and knowing when to triangulate, a term he and Dick Morris popularized in 1996. That's true. That's very true. I remember they shut down the government a couple of times. They got in a piston match. Newt Gingrich and President Clinton sat down and said, okay, we proved our points. Let's cut through the crap and work together, and they did. And that was the goal of the founders. They went about it in an indirect way, but it ended up in the right place. Democrats don't know when to stop. Absolutely true. No one in the Democrat Party leadership today knows how to triangulate. Even when they are strayed from their platform of Trump being bad, they focused on things that appeal mostly to their wealthy donors or their most radical constituents. Every debate had a significant segment on the government's role in environmental regulation, something that people who are already going to vote Democrat care a great deal about. Almost nothing was asked of Trump or Biden about jobs, education, and trade, the bread and butter issues for millions of voters. Biden at least could speak to those points in his own disjointed fashion. Democratic congressional candidates were much more myopic on these kitchen table issues, and corporate media encouraged the blindness. That's true. Now, how they pulled it off in Georgia, I have my thoughts on the matter. I'd rather not say because the algorithm will pick it up. I think you get the idea. That's what I meant by don't interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake, because the Democrats always go too far, and you use Clinton as the exception. Contrast this with the 2006 elections when Democrats picked up 31 seats in the House to regain control of the chamber for the first time in a dozen years. They picked up 5 seats in the Senate that year, too, making a slim majority. Then, too, Democrats were running against a Republican president in the Iraq War that had some become increasingly unpopular with the electorate. People forget something. Donald Trump didn't escalate or start any wars. I thought that was a big deal to the liberals and progressives. But in 2006, Pelosi and Harry Reid knew that the way back to majority status was through the center, not the fringe. See, Pelosi, I'll tell you what, I mean, she's a piece of blank, but she's a brilliant politician. And she knows she screwed up this time. Well, they have 4 or 5 seats advantage. Yeah, they beat Donald Trump, and they got the Senate, barely. If Joe Manchin switches his mind or somebody else on something incredibly stupid, they'll be powerless. In Pennsylvania, for example, they won with House candidates like Joe Sestak and Chris Carney, ex-military men who communicated a moderate, professional approach to government. In the Senate, Pennsylvania sent Bob Casey Jr., who was still pretending to be pro-life. I guess he changed his mind later. I'm not familiar with Bob Casey. To join Jim Webb of Virginia and Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota. Remember, Klobuchar, now the senator from Minnesota, one of the presidential candidates. In fact, I can't stand her, to be honest with you. I think she's condescending and arrogant. But of all the ones that were up there, she was probably, if I had to pick one, she was one of the 2 that I would have picked. I mean, if I was forced to pick one, or I was in an open primary state, and as a Republican, I could vote in a Democrat primary. All presented themselves as reasonable moderates, and some of them actually were. Pelosi and Schumer have drifted apart in the 14 years since then, and assume the rest of the electorate has joined them. That's true. They think they're leading the pack, but the small pack is leading them. The result of the 2020 show, they were wrong. But even had the party leadership understood the degree to which they were out of touch, would it matter? Would a pro-life Democrat like Casey, a career prosecutor like Klobuchar, or an ex-Republican former soldier like Webb win a Democratic primary today? Probably not for the House anyway. Even when the support of the party, will the Democrat of 2020 fall in line? Good question. I say they wouldn't. It's hard to imagine them winning in the most jurisdictions nowadays. Jurisdictions. Boy, I tell you, it's late. It's about 1 o'clock in the morning. Jurisdictions, good Lord. Part of the problem is that we increasingly sort ourselves geographically. For progressive Democrats especially, that can mean living in a city where everyone looks different, but the thoughts they express publicly are remarkably similar. And that's interesting. That's an interesting line. Everybody looks different. In other words, great diversity of race. But the thoughts they express publicly are remarkably similar. I like that line a lot. That says a lot, too. No congressional district is 100% liberal Democrat, but the public scorn that awaits moderates' comments or even heavy forefend conservative speech can give the progressive the same bubble effect that washed-in politicians enjoy. Yeah. They have only the evidence available to them, and when fewer people are comfortable speaking their minds, that limits the evidence as to what confirms, not challenges. That was what I'll call the secret Trump voter. Even though technically yesterday he officially lost, people don't speak their minds. And so all they hear, these progressives hear, is what they believe in. And they assume everybody else does too. While replacing a moderate with a radical is no harm in a solid Democratic district, such as Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Now, I can't stand her. I think she's dumber than a bag of rocks. She's got a great name. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That sounds like a royalty. I like the name. I can't stand her or what she believes in. Elsewhere, it drives independent voters away. For all the talk of turning Texas blue, Democrats there shot themselves in the foot by nominating radical lefties such as Wendy Davis, who was most famous for her strident pro-abortion stance. Meanwhile, moderate Democrats such as Pennsylvania's Connor Lamb look to edge out victories in marginal districts. Progressives in Washington and on the internet have been getting high on their own supply for the last 4 years. I like that. High on their own supply. That's a pretty cool line. They might yet get their fondest wish in removing Trump from office, and they did. But the mania with which they pursued that goal and their lack of focus on issues important to ordinary families ensured that every other race tilted back to their opponents. And it gives you a background on Kyle Salmon. He's a lawyer from Pennsylvania, and you can see some of the things he's got there. And I agree 100%. It's, by a weird coincidence, I live in the only district, except for the one where the gentleman died. I believe it was Louisiana. He died of COVID. He was fairly young, in his 40s. I was the only district that didn't have any representation when they picked Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. I live in upstate New York in New York District 22. The incumbent, Anthony Brindisi, and then before that was Claudia Tenney. Claudia lost to Brindisi. And I know Claudia, she's a really good egg. She's sharp. I talk to her every once in a while. She takes the time to talk to regular guys like me. I just own a little convenience store upstate, and that's really good of her. But I have no representation because, believe it or not, they're still fighting stuff out in court because of all the mail-ins and, I use air quotes now and you can't see me, provisional ballots. That's where somebody comes in and they can't find their name in the book, and rather than disenfranchise somebody, they get to fill out a provisional ballot and put it on the side. Now I hear those ballots are put in machines and counted, and it's like it's a nightmare. Absolute nightmare. And that's set up by design by the Democrats. They went too far. Now, they got rid of Trump with it. all these real changes and shenanigans they did, they think now they're the king of the world. They actually think they won. And they're getting high on their own supply. I like that. I'm going to use that. They're getting high on their own supply because of the tragedy that happened in the Capitol. But I think, too, now a normal person, that's a member of Congress, that's normal thinking, I should say, would say, hey, Jesus, man, there's a lot of pissed off people out there. There was almost 400,000 by some estimates. That's a ton. If they had surrounded the Capitol, we would have been SOL. Oh, you older folks know what SOL means. Maybe younger ones don't. But instead, a few hundred screwed up and trashed some other Capitol and lost a lot of capital for the Republican Party and Trump. But they think they won that one. But a normal thinking representative would have thought, you know what? There's a lot of pissed off people out there. And there's 74 million people that voted for Donald Trump. That's a lot. That's a lot. They're not all racist and homophobes and misogynists and blah, 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 blah. Of course not. And they know that. Even the progressives know that, except for the small percent that are whack jobs. They know that these people are just normal, everyday working people that have been going through hell because of the illegal lockdowns in a lot of Democrat states. And they think to themselves, they're not all nuts. What are they mad about? Let's ask. Let's try to find out and sit down with some of them in my district or my state, or even out of state for that matter. We'll say it's a regional area like the Midwest. Or we'll say Pennsylvania, where they have big cities and rural both, very much like New York, where upstate in New York City is like the difference between Mars and Venus. And let's see what their concerns are. Not bitching and screaming and hollering and blah, 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 blah. No, sit down and say, sir, ma'am, please, can you spare an hour? I like to chew the fat with you a little bit. I like to shoot the breeze and try to calmly figure out why you're so pissed off. But they won't do that. And they had to talk about normal people. I heard a story that one of the people that broke into the Capitol building while it was in session, that must have scared the crap out of them. And I hope it did. I'm not glad that it happened. But I think the normal ones, it scared the crap out of them. You know what? Maybe we're doing something wrong and we should change. I hope that happens. But supposedly the story goes, there was a woman in her mid to late 60s standing in the rotunda with all these people running all the time, just looking around the ceiling like she's a tourist in awe, drinking out of a little juice box. I mean, that's an everyday person. That's the salt of the earth. That's the people that make this country run. And why is she there? She's probably a Trump supporter. But when everybody started running the building, she says, okay, I'll go in too. I mean, she's just an old lady. So that's the people that they're losing touch with, the everyday working people who are now so pissed that they've been forgotten. They've been taken advantage of, especially in the last 20, 30 years with trade deals that have destroyed working class cities and states, manufacturing plants. What was it, 50,000 or 80,000 manufacturing plants shut down the last 30 years? That's millions of people. And everybody knows the multiplier effect in economics. You make 40 grand a year working at the factory, and you spend it in your small town, and then the stores you spend it in spend it somewhere else, and the money goes round and round and round and makes money for everybody. It's great. It's an amazing thing. Capitalism is a wonderful thing when done correctly. It makes everybody, not rich, depending on how much ambition you have, but at least make a decent living, enough to have a home, children, and a little bit of retirement. You know, a decent car, go on vacation. You're not going, you have your own private jet, but you live a decent life, and a good one at that. And tens of millions had that taken away from them. And then Trump came along. And I'm a big Trump supporter. I'm not going to say otherwise. He's not perfect. I criticize him when he's wrong. I thought he could have handled it a little bit better at maybe not mentioning what he thought was the FRAUD in the election and his speech. But he thought people are going to be peaceful. He didn't know. And there's information coming out now. There was a lot of instigators from outside, the Trump supporters. But we'll find out. But anyway, I digress. These are the people that they've forgotten. These are the people he's talking about. The tens of millions of people that are now been locked down illegally. Their lives destroyed. Their jobs are gone. Their businesses are gone. Business that has been in the family for generations are now closed. The bankruptcies. The drug and alcohol abuse has gone up sky high. So has the divorce rate. So is depression in adults, teenagers, and children is through the roof. I understand depression medication is up 400%. These are the salt of the earth people that the progressives forgot about. And this is what he means by the bubble. They think that the rest of the country thinks just like the same people they talk to and go in a circle in their own bubble. They don't know. They don't have a clue because they don't sit down. And I don't mean like town hall meetings that Congress people have. I think if a Congress member was in a swing state and they were smart, and a lot of them are. They're not all, the vast majority aren't stupid. They just do the wrong thing, but they're not stupid. Every once in a while, I just walk into a diner in my congressional district, say, hi, I'm Congressman John Cordisco. I see you're a couple here, look like they're probably mid-40s, 50 years old. Can I sit with you guys and shoot the breeze a little bit about what your concerns are? And I'll pick up your lunch. That would be brilliant. You do that 2 or 3 times a week when you're when you're out of D.C., you'd be surprised what you could pick up. And that's what this guy is talking about indirectly. This is the mistake that the Democrats make. They always go too far. Always, always, always. Democrats don't know when to stop. No one in the Democrat Party leadership today knows how to triangulate, and he explains how Clinton learned that. And he was the last of the Democrats to learn that. And I met Bill Clinton once years ago, briefly, but I digress again. I used to be a Democrat local elected official from 2000 to 2007 on the local city council. I left the party in 2013 to become a Republican. They did forget, and they were the party for a long, long time of the blue-collar, working-class people. When labor unions were decent and did the right thing, that was their bread and butter. And slowly over time, they switched over to huge corporations, social media monsters, mainstream media. They now go hand in hand with the Democrat Party, and the young people that are making really good money, the elites as they call them. They're not very elite. And the middle class, the everyday people, were left behind, and that's how Donald Trump won. And they don't learn. History is to be studied so it can be learned. And they're not going to learn. And they won't learn for some reason. Their hatred for Trump is so strong. But they were blind. They had blinders on even previous to Trump. And their days are numbered. In 2 years, in the midterms, and the next series of Senate re-elections. Now, this time, we all know, this is after the article was written, but we all know that both the Georgia seats went Democrat, which 50-50, and so in all intents and purposes, the Democrats control the chamber. This next cycle in 2 years, 2/3 of the senators up for re-election are Democrats. That's a lot of defending. That's a lot of defending. And I believe there's only a 6-seat majority in the House. This will probably be Nancy Pelosi's last term, thank God. But in a way, though, I'd want her to stay because she would be the only House Speaker in the history of the United States, I believe, to lose the majority twice. Anyway, they are in this bubble, and they just don't see it. And they're going to blow a Biden presidency big time. They're going to double down on the stupidity they already do. And it's going to turn off all the moderates, all the working class people that are still Democrats. And then when the election comes around in 2 years in the House, they are going to get slaughtered. It's going to make what Newt Gingrich did with the contract with America look like a joke. They're going to get wiped. And I don't even know if they realize it or not. But they don't. They think they won. They think they won. Anyway, folks, I thought it was a pretty good article, even though it was short. It's going to cost them. As they used everything against Donald Trump and they barely beat him. And they don't get that point that, we did all of this. We had social media monsters on our side, censoring everything we wanted them to censor. It's like we owned Twitter, we owned Facebook, we owned CNN, we owned MSNBC, NBC, ABC, CBS, all right down the list, NPR, all the online publications, Politico, and all the ultra-liberal online. They owned them all. And in fact, many of these periodicals and news agencies used to call the Democrats before a story came out to okay it with them. They did it with Hillary Clinton. We're going to write this story. Do you think you want us to change? That's how bad it is. So they think they have everything, but they don't have the average American. And that's the bubble they're missing. So I'll tell all my Republican, conservative, and moderate friends out there, just be patient. It looks pretty dark right now. But it looked pretty dark in the middle of the Civil War, too. And look how that worked out. Never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. And until next time, folks, goodbye and good luck.